G'day guys, and thank you for checking out this tutorial. Well, the jets are here, and while I've seen some players using them to provide very effective close air support, I have noticed that there are some pilots who are struggling to hit ground targets or are wiping themselves out instead. That's because these jets handle very differently to the piston engine aircraft that we're used to, and each jet performs just a little differently depending on which faction's jet you are flying. So I've made this video to show you the techniques that I use to provide close air support while using jets, with some tips tailored specific to each jet so you can get the best accuracy and consistency no matter which faction you are playing for. So if you're someone who can't seem to hit ground targets or you've been crashing during your bombing runs, this guide should help you stay alive and land your bombs on target every time. Now if you're flying jets, then I'm going to assume that you already know the basics of flying in Enlisted and should have some experience landing bombs on targets using the piston aircraft. I want to quickly show you the technique which I use for prop planes first, so you can see how things change when I switch to bombing with jets. The technique is still very similar, but has some minor but crucial changes. When using a prop plane, I usually start my run at around 300 to 500 meters altitude, and the first thing I do is make sure that I have marked the target. I then start my dive, aiming my plane directly at the target. When the nose of the plane covers the target, I release the bomb and then immediately pull up. As I pull up, I roll slightly to one side and use free look to glance back and check if the bomb's hit. When I see the explosion and that skull icon, I know I got the kill. If I've missed though, then the free look view helps me to understand why. Maybe I've dropped too early, maybe I've dropped too late, or maybe the target has moved, just like in this clip here. Either way, looking back at the explosion helps me to fine-tune my accuracy for the next run. So just to recap, mark the target, dive down aiming directly at the target, release when the nose of the plane covers the target, pull up and use free look to check the hit. This technique will work well with most piston planes because they are slower, more responsive and give you more time to correct. The technique that I use for jets is similar to prop planes, but it changes slightly to allow for the extra speed and the larger turn radius. It'll work well for most of the jets in Enlisted, but each jet has its own quirks and you'll need to make sure that you change your approach slightly depending on which jet you are flying. So I want to start with the Japanese Kikka, as I think it's the most straightforward jet to bomb with. From here we'll move on to the Soviets Su-9, followed by the Allied jets and then the Axis jets. Just a quick look at the Kikka's stats and we'll see that it's got a top speed of 876 km per hour and a turn time of 15.59 seconds, making it one of the faster jets in Enlisted with decent maneuverability. It also carries the newly upgraded 800 kilo bomb mounted directly under the centre of the aircraft. This bomb is very heavy and you'll really notice the weight of the bomb while you're carrying it, especially while you're turning, but you should see a big improvement in the aircraft's handling once you've made your drop. Now to perfect my technique, I headed to the practice range, and if you're struggling to land bombs on target as well, then I highly recommend that you do the same. This footage is from the Enlisted development server just before the jets were released, and just so you know, it's completely unedited, as you can see from this little timer up here. I wasn't planning to make a tutorial for this practice session, but I ended up recording it and the footage turned out so well that I couldn't just let it go to waste. The practice range is ideal because you can practice your bombing runs over and over again without the pressure of being shot down, and if you miss, you can just go back and try again. So the bombing technique that I use for the jets is similar to the technique that I use for piston planes, but here's one of the key differences. Instead of diving directly at the target, I'm going to aim slightly below it. As I get closer to the ground, I start pulling up and aim slightly above the target. As the nose of the plane covers the target, I release the bomb. Immediately after release, I pull up and turn slightly to the side, using free look to confirm the hit, just like I did with the piston aircraft. You'll also notice that I'm doing these bombing runs at full throttle, so there's no need to slow down or use your flaps as some other people might suggest. The goal here is to maintain maximum speed and energy so you can escape to safety once you've completed your drop. Now here's another really helpful tip. Pick a reference point on your aircraft's control panel, something visible inside the cockpit. For me, I'm going to choose this point right here. When that point lines up with the target, that's your visual cue to drop the bomb. This will help to tell if you're releasing too early or too late, and you can adjust your timing by picking a new spot on the panel. If your bombs are falling short, this means you're releasing too early, and you need to try using a point further back on the panel. If your bombs are overshooting, then you're releasing too late, so you need to shift your aim slightly higher on the panel so that you're releasing the bomb just that little bit earlier. Next, we're going to have a look at the Soviet Su-9. After this, then we'll move on to the Allied jets and then on to the German aircraft, which are my personal favourite. When we look at the Su-9, we can see that it carries a single 500 kilo bomb located directly under the centre of the aircraft. When we look at its stats, we can see that it has a top speed of 898 km an hour and a turn time of 18.16 seconds. This means it holds the titles for the highest top speed and the slowest turn time for any of the jets in Enlisted, which also means you will need to be extra precise and careful when performing your bombing runs. The technique that I use for the Su-9 is very similar to the one that I use for the Kikka, but there is a slight change that you will need to make. As usual, I start by marking the target and dive from 300 to 500 meters altitude, aiming just below the target. As I get close to the ground, I level out and release the bomb when the target lines up with the top of the control panel. I then pull up, roll to the side and look back and check for the hit. Now, one thing you'll notice about the Su-9 is that it tends to drift, just slightly, but enough to throw your aim off if you're not ready for it. Let's just have another quick look and see if you notice it. To overcome this, you need to use smooth and controlled inputs and slightly overcompensate when you're lining up. Try to be gentle with your adjustments and avoid big jerky movements. This will help counteract that drift and will keep you lined up with the target. As you can see now, this method works very well, and during the test run with the Su-9, I managed to land 13 hits in a row before I finally missed. Now let's move on to the first of the Allied jets, the Meteor F Mk.3. This is the most beginner-friendly jet in the game. It has the fastest turn rate and the lowest top speed, which makes it very forgiving and incredibly effective at providing close air support and for engaging enemy aircraft. It is armed with two 1,000-pound bombs mounted under its wings, which gives you a choice. You can drop one bomb per pass, or both in the same pass. There is a catch though. If you drop only one bomb, the aircraft will become unbalanced. This makes it harder to steer and dogfight, although it is still possible, and I have managed to down enemy aircraft while only carrying one bomb. For target practice, I use the same core technique as described earlier, but this time in the practice range, I mark two targets to test my accuracy and see if I can hit them both in the one pass. Just like before, I start by marking the targets and then dive down aiming at a point below the targets. I then level out and release the bombs when the targets line up with the control panel. And as you can see, I was able to hit both targets several times in a row. This is a great tactic for when you see two tanks bunched up, or if you want to cut off enemy reinforcements by bombing behind the capture point. Alternatively, you can drop one bomb on your first pass, and then after you've turned around, you can do a second pass to drop the second bomb on your way back to resupply. Personally though, I prefer to drop both bombs in one pass, as I like to keep the aircraft balanced in case I need to engage enemy aircraft. Up next, we're going to have a look at the F-80A-5, which is the premium jet available for the Allied armies. Just like the Meteor, it carries two 1,000-pound bombs located under its wings. It also has a very high maximum speed, second only to the Su-9, and a fast rate of turn, which is going to be very helpful during our bombing runs. On the practice range, I used the same technique as described earlier, and just like with the Meteor, I started by marking two targets so I can practice hitting two different locations in one pass. And as expected, the F-80A-5 was consistently able to land bombs accurately on target for several consecutive runs. But just like the Meteor, you have the option of either dropping both bombs in one pass or completing two runs and dropping one bomb each time. Carrying one bomb does make the jet unbalanced, however. There was an instance during one game where I accidentally dropped only one bomb and then engaged an enemy aircraft in a dogfight. The F-80A-5 performed very well despite being unbalanced, and I was able to win the fight. It wasn't until I was heading back to rearm that I actually noticed I was still carrying one bomb. So now we're going to move on to the Axis jets, and we're going to start with the Me-262A1A. It carries a single 500 kilo bomb located underneath the centre of the aircraft. The Me-262 is one of the slower aircraft, and they also have a very slow turning time, so you'll need to keep this in mind when you're doing your bombing runs. On the practice range, the Me-262 was able to land bombs on target using the same technique as described before. One thing that you'll need to keep in mind when flying the Me-262 is that the aiming reticle is not located in the center of the aircraft, but rather it sits off slightly to the right. You'll need to be careful of this during your approach and make sure that you're using the center of the cockpit rather than the aiming reticle when lining up your approach. If you use the reticle to line up your approach, then you won't be flying directly over your target, which may affect the accuracy of your drop. By using the center of the cockpit to line up my approach, I was able to consistently land bombs accurately time and time again. And just one other thing, the 30mm cannons are very effective for strafing and taking out infantry and light vehicles. I don't often strafe targets when flying because the traces can easily be seen by enemy aircraft, but with the Me-262's 30mm guns, it is a great way to add some additional pressure to the enemy team. The last jet in the lineup is the Me-262A-5. This aircraft carries no bombs, but instead has a 50mm cannon located in the nose of the plane. The cannon is powerful enough to take out Allied and Soviet tanks, providing that you are lining up your shots properly. When using the cannon, avoid hitting tanks from the front where they are heavily armoured. Instead, try approaching from the side and targeting the ammo racks, or you can shoot from above and target the engine bay or turret hatch. At the practice range, I was able to take out some of the more heavily armoured tanks, such as the IS-1 and IS-2, using single shots by attacking from the side and targeting the ammo rack. In game, I prefer to use the same technique and attack from the side, targeting the ammo rack. I prefer not to use the technique which attacks directly from above, as I feel it leaves me too vulnerable to enemy aircraft, and I'm also worried that I'll end up burying that 50mm gun into the dirt and wiping myself out. So that's it guys, I'm going to leave you now with one of the more enjoyable dogfights that I've had in a jet so far. If you liked the video or found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up and drop me a comment. And if you're into dogfighting and you want to become a better pilot, please consider subscribing to my channel. The next tutorial videos that I'll be coming out with are a series where I'll teach you how to improve your flying and also share some air combat techniques that you can use in your next game. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.